our youth, tear upon the core of blasphemy. Follow your prophet, and on evil make a victory. Let our righteousness be a role model to our children, making new generations of believers decently upbringing, with parents as an example. As gems we shape them, fearing only Allah, devoting our lives for Him.
Bismillah, Assalamu alaikum, peace. Welcome to Closing the Gap. I'm your host, Omar Dunlap. We have with us Sheikh Yusuf Estes. Welcome.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam rahmatullah. Sheikh, we've been talking about in previous episodes the gap between the law, particularly God's law, and secular or Western or man-made law and so on. Mm-hmm. And we got something today that's kind of touching on the same thing. Maybe it's not exactly that, but it's in that general spirit. The gap between mercy and, revenge, right. The gap between mercy and revenge. And so what do we have for our viewers on that today?
Omar, this is an excellent chance really to give some demonstration of the things that we've been talking about in the previous programs. When we talk about revenge, we look to the holy books and see that actually they spell it clearly out there. There is revenge. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And this vengeance is something that is spelled out, but it shows the limits of how far you can go. The eye for an eye, for instance, of the Old Testament is pretty clear. You can take a person's eye that took your eye, but you couldn't take both of his eyes. So it's singular. Right. A tooth for a tooth. He knocks out your tooth, you can knock out his tooth, but not two or three teeth. We carry it forward, though, to the New Testament. We find that Jesus, peace be upon him, is telling people about this clemency, talking about this mercy that's there, and you don't have to take this revenge, although it's possible, but you don't have to. You don't have to implement this full law on the people, but it's there if you want to follow that and really dish it out. One of the most common references that Christians will make to the New Testament is when we talk about the topic of the prostitute who had been caught and they were going to stone her to death. Now these people who were going to stone her were actually part of the Sadducees or the Zealots, and those who were, it could be one of either of the groups. It's not the same group by any stretch of imagination, but they are ready to stone this lady. They're going to throw stones on her and kill her. Right. And then according to what they have in the Translation Bible today, it says that Jesus told them, well, why don't you, who is without sin, throw the first stone at her. Whoever doesn't have any sin on them, that's not done this sin in one way or another. Another example he gave him was, even if you have done this in your heart, then you've committed this sin. So what do you say to that? And they all walk away and they didn't stone her, according to this story. Now, how much is true, again, we don't know. But we do know that in Islam, we find something similar again. There is such a thing as taking vengeance, but it's spelled out clearly that if you forgive, it's better for you on the Day of Judgment, because you forgive somebody here, Allah forgives you on the Day of Judgment. Right. Simple as that. And then what about some examples? One of the best examples that we have in recent times is the case where a robber had broken into one of these convenience stores. He was going to rob them. Now they have a video camera catching this whole thing on tape. Here's this man going up there with a weapon, a gun, and he's holding up the place, and the man behind the counter is a Muslim. And he's being robbed by this man. Now, there you go. All these stories about cutting the hand of a robber. Here's your proof on camera. Because what did the Muslim actually do? The Muslim wrestled with the man and got his weapon away from him. Now, according to this misconception so many people have, right there the man should have been chopping his hand off or shooting him or something. Right. Instead, he began to explain to him, what is Islam really about? about forgiving, about mercy, and talking about this side of it, which we never hear in the media. As a result, the man accepted Islam, and they forgave him and let him go.
It's powerful.
Now, do we see this in other societies? Do we see this in other legal structures where somebody could do that? I would like to call attention to something from the Catholic Church as well. If you recall, some years ago, someone shot the Pope. Now, the Pope didn't die, but he had been shot by somebody who was trying to make some kind of statement for his girlfriend or showing off or whatever it was, some crazy mood swing, but he shot the Pope. Now, what do you think that should be done to him? Well, immediately, I'm sure there were plenty of Catholics who would have been happy to take that person out and remove, every portion of his body physically, just dissect him and leave him for the birds.
Right.
But in fact, the Pope requested a meeting with the gentleman. And he talked with him and made him understand some things. The man accepted, and the Pope forgave him. So this shows the demonstration that when you really believe in the monotheistic religions, you understand what the limit of the law is, but at the same exact time, you're understanding what the mercy is that goes with it. Because throughout the teachings of the monotheistic faith, there's always been mercy, although many people didn't demonstrate it. And we can look to stories in the Bible, we can look to stories that we hear from prophets, and we can see, wow, they didn't demonstrate this mercy. But at the same time, we can find examples where people did it. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was known as the mercy to mankind. And in his own case, there was one who killed his uncle in a very despicable way. In normal battle for the Arabs, when they engage, it has to be out in the open, no sneaky stuff.
Right.
You fight hand to hand, man to man, this is the way, and if you die with the sword in your hand, and that was their tradition. All the people understood that. There was one, though, who was a slave, who was promised his freedom and some money if he would kill this uncle of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And how was he to do it? Because he was very good with the spear. So he went to this battle, and he didn't engage any fight with anybody else. He just kept looking for his chance, sneaking around behind rocks, this and that, until he could get a really clear shot. And then from a far distance, with no warning whatsoever, he threw that spear, and it went down and impaled Hamza, the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ, impaled him to the ground, went down through and split his hip in the back and went into the ground, so much so that he was unable to walk or move. He was nailed to the ground, still fighting, and died in that position, fighting. Now, later, much later on, years to come, this same man comes to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and says, I want to be a Muslim. I only did what I did for the money, for this and that. And even though he had fought in this despicable manner, even though he had killed the favorite uncle of the Prophet ﷺ, even though the Prophet ﷺ had seen it with his own eyes, the Prophet told him, you can be a Muslim. Fine and good, come ahead. But please, don't get in my face. Don't, because it's a reminder to him of what this man did. You're a Muslim. When you come to Islam, Allah forgives everything.
Right.
Whatever you did in the past, Allah forgives you. So fine, Allah is going to forgive him now for what he did. But the Prophet ﷺ has this place in his heart for his uncle, and he's saying, just stay out of the way.
Yeah.
And according to vengeance, he could have said, even though we're going to take your life because you took my uncle's life. And he didn't do that.
And I don't think anyone would have condemned him for that. I mean, that's logical.
Well, none of the followers of Muhammad ever condemned him for anything.
I'm saying even non-Muslims.
No, they would not have, because this was their tradition,
Right.
and it was well within their rights. This is something clear from Arab tradition, yeah.
SubhanAllah. Well, tell me more about vengeance. What do we mean when we say vengeance?
Well, vengeance is when someone has wronged you in some way, and you want to take your fair share back on them.
Right.
I want my portion here. You've stolen from me, I want something from you. You've injured me, I want something from you. You've injured a member of my family, then I want to get some vengeance from you guys. In other words, he's saying, I want my pound of flesh. That's the famous expression, isn't it? And this was common even back at the time of Muhammad, peace be upon him, that there was a war between tribes over a camel race. Now, these camels, still today, you see National Geographic, and they show you all the camels look like a bunch of ants going across there. Well, the camel that won the race was, by this one family, and a boy who lost in the race was so angry, he picked up a rock, and he killed the camel with that rock. So then they killed the boy. Well, then the tribe of the boy began to attack them, and this feud continued for the next 40 years of these tribes killing each other, on and on and on. And in poetry and literature, we find from the story of Romeo and Juliet. Here's the story of the Capulets and the Montagues and their family feud, and they're killing each other. And in the Hatfields and the McCoys in the United States, and the stories that we have there. I think you're from Tennessee.
Right.
You know about family feuds.
Right, I was going to mention that. I was like, that's not uncommon for us guys from the South. We know about those.
Yeah, and so it's there. So when we see somebody who is saying, no, I don't want my pound of flesh. No, so here's the example from Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. While he was teaching his companions about this subject, he was explaining that you must not hit somebody harder than they hit you, and you must not take more from them than they took from you. But of course, it's better to forgive.
Right.
So a person sitting next to him said, well, when you sat down, you hit me. You hit me. What? All the companions are like, oh, come on, man, what are you saying? He said, no, when he sat down, he hit me, with his arm or something.
Right.
And I want my revenge. Can I have my revenge? The Prophet said, yes, you can. He said, well, I can't hit you the same way because I don't have a garment covering me here where you hit me and you have a garment. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, lifted up his garment, exposing his side. When he did, the man leaned forward and kissed him. He said, I didn't really want the revenge, I just wanted to kiss you. So we see, in a playful way, but we understand that the Prophet was communicating a message and they understood it, which is, have mercy for others so you'll be shown mercy. That is a very basic teaching in Islam. You may not see it demonstrated in the news and the media, on the internet and so on, but in fact, the good Muslims are living up to that. Show mercy so that you'll be shown mercy on the Day of Judgment.
Well, Sheikh, we're going to go to a short break. We'll be right back, so don't go anywhere. You're watching Closing the Gap.
Fearing only Allah, devoting our lives for Him.
Love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for those who worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, for those who want to enter the Jannah, the paradise that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created for the believers. And that's why we need to learn and we need to get to know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us, so that we submit ourselves to the orders of Allah. And this is knowledge that we need to learn. Why we're spending more time to look into the verses and to the meanings of the verses in depth, so that we can get to learn from it what we need ourselves to be steadfast, to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to ponder over the meanings of the miraculous words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Fearing only Allah, devoting our lives for Him.
Bismillah. Welcome back to Closing the Gap. I'm your host, Omar Dunlap. We have with us Sheikh Yusuf Estes. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Sheikh, today we're closing that gap between mercy and revenge.
Okay.
And we've had a lot of good thoughts on that so far today. And if we can, I want to start moving it towards the direction of what does Islam have to say about this subject, and we can talk about all kinds of things, patience and so on. So what do we have for our viewers today?
Omar, you and I are normal human beings just like anybody else. The fact that we're sitting here on a TV set and talking and so on doesn't exclude us from having emotions and feelings. And every one of us, when we're driving down the street, we have experiences. When we go to parking lots looking for a place to park our vehicle, we've got problems. And shopping carts inside the mall or stores, all of us encounter problems with other people. Somebody cuts you off in traffic. Somebody doesn't go when the light turns green. What do? When I get to the parking lot, I was waiting for that space. It became available, but somebody cuts me off and pulls into that space.
Right.
When I go to the door and I'm holding it open for somebody, the next person comes through and lets the door slam in my face.
Right.
And then when I'm using my shopping cart and somebody just runs right into it. Things that happen like that to us every day. And I'm describing just minor things.
Right.
How do we deal with that? What do we do? Now, counselors sit and talk with people that have these emotional problems all the time about how to control your anger, how to control your emotions, getting yourself under control so that you don't flare up and blow up at people. But what about on a bigger scale, when somebody does something really bad to you? Maybe somebody runs right into your car and damages your vehicle, and how do you feel? And what do you do about it? If you can keep your patience and not try to take revenge, it's good for you and it's good for them. It's good for you because you don't get all this acid in your stomach. You don't have this adrenaline running through your body. You don't have this fight or flight syndrome hitting you.
Right.
You're being calm and you're saying, you know what? It's just a car.
Right.
And it's just a shopping cart. It's just a place to park a car. And people, give you bad words, say evil things to you, or give you hand signs,
Right.
things that hurt your feelings.
Hand
But how do
sign.
you respond? Respond back to them. What do you do?
Right.
What are you going to say? What are you going to do?
Right.
Because if you reply in kind to them, then really, and by the way, I don't know why they say reply in kind, because it's not very kind to do that. It's better for us to keep ourselves under control. But then there has to be a limit, because somebody might see you as being a wimp and saying, okay, I just run over this guy. He's just a clown, I don't care what I do to him.
Right.
And maybe you hold a black belt. Maybe you're a weightlifter. In fact, I think you are a weightlifter.
A little bit.
A little bit, I thought so. So you have the ability maybe to crush this person into the ground, but now what are you going to do? And he keeps giving you a hard time. You keep withholding, and he keeps coming back with more. And he's telling his friends, let's go over to Omar's house today and, pounce on him when he comes off the porch. And, you want to let them understand that, guys, the only reason you're still standing is because of my religion. So there has to be a place where we could draw a line and let people understand that, guys, don't go too far with this, all right? We're working with you here. You're working with us. We're trying to be patient, but don't push your luck.
Right. So we would say that there is a line. We're not just going to be a doormat for people to walk on. There's a line there.
Well, this has happened on an individual basis and a collective basis for many years. Even in recent years, we can see things that have taken place in Muslim countries where they have tolerated things for a very long time, and then all of a sudden they can't take it anymore. One or two or a large group will stand up and start going crazy. The problem comes in, though, when you don't do it for Allah. You're just doing it, holding back, and when they let go, they go crazy and go way over. And this is, all of a sudden, these are the extremists, these are the terrorists, and because they're doing what? They're terrorizing.
Right.
They are being extreme, without doubt. You might try to justify that, saying, yeah, but you don't know their condition. Even a mouse, if you back him up in a corner, will try to attack you.
Right.
Because what else has he got to lose?
Right.
But it should be that we understand why we're doing what we're doing, and then give ourselves the opportunity to let the other party know that there is a line, guys, and let's don't go to that.
Right.
Let's find other ways to resolve differences, and we're willing to stop. Let's say, let bygones be bygones, but let's don't keep pushing it.
Right. Wasn't that kind of what was happening with, I believe, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu he had like some sort of treaty, right, with the people that he used to have wars with?
Actually, they have more than one treaty, but yes, these treaties were a way for real men to show their integrity. Because in those days, if you signed a treaty, this was a very big deal. It was incumbent on you to endeavor to do your very utmost to fulfill your end of the bargain.
Right.
The problem they ran into is that these guys wouldn't do it. They would not live up to their treaty. In fact, some of them purposely sabotaged things and made things even more difficult for the Muslims.
Right.
And they would have continued, the Muslims would have continued with those treaties had Allah not revealed in the Quran verses telling them, hey, the gloves are off, go for it.
Right.
Because the Muslims never fought collectively in battle at any time during the 13 years they were persecuted, driven out of their homes, driven off their land, and abused, mutilated, murdered, raped, and all of that is happening for these years, the early years in Mecca, and the 2 years that they put sanctions against the Muslims and left them in the desert in a valley to die.
SubhanAllah.
But they still didn't fight because they were upholding for Allah. They wanted to do things. Some did self-defense, but nothing collective. Not until they were in Medina, al-Munawwara. When they were there, then these verses came telling them to go back and collect what you have an agreement to collect, which was what? To do the pilgrimage, the Hajj. The verses in the Quran, all dealing with this subject, every one of them is dealing with the subject of going back and doing Hajj.
Right.
Now, very few people will read the verses around it. Even some scholars don't bother to do that, to show you this was particularly telling them to go back to the place where they do their Hajj, the place of their former residence, the place they'd been driven out of, the place that had been stolen from them, and perform your Hajj. And if these people attack you and fight you in combat, then you engage with them in the same way as they do you, but don't you dare go back to the days of ignorance and go beyond this limit.
Right.
Don't you go beyond it, otherwise you're the aggressor. Verily, Allah does not love the aggressors. And what they do, they cut parts of this out, put it on the internet, and says, go kill all the Jews and Christians. It doesn't have anything to do with Jews and Christians.
Right.
It had to do with idolaters in Mecca,
Right.
their own relatives that had an agreement with them, who killed them when they came down just to do their perform their Hajj.
Right. Sheikh, you mentioned something earlier to the effect of, like, you know, we're going to the grocery store and somebody cuts us off, or steals our parking spot, runs their cart into us or something, and could end up in someone, you know, cussing at you or getting angry or raising their voice. I'm wondering, was there anything like that that happened during the life of the Prophet Muhammad? Somebody was, you know, says, or maybe during the life of the Khalifas after the Prophet, where somebody were getting angry with them and their response was to be patient? Anything like
Many, many examples. I don't know how much time we have left, but just to give you a couple. One of the most famous examples of all was that a neighbor to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, used to throw garbage and trash, brambles, things like this, in his walkway. Now, in those days, you know, people didn't have inside toilets, so anytime you wanted to go to the bathroom, you had to go out. And in the dark, here you've got all this stuff that you're stepping on and hurting your legs, and they, you know, they were just wearing sandals.
Right.
You can imagine how he suffered every time he would go out. He'd clean it up, and then the next day it would be there again. The next night it's there again. But then one day it wasn't there. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, went to his neighbor and called upon him, knocked on the door, and went in and found the man ill. And he wanted to take care of the man. And he said, excuse me, don't you know I'm the one who's been putting all of that stuff out there for you to fall over and get hurt on and everything, you know? He said, of course I know that. In fact, that's how I knew you were sick. I didn't find it there, so I figured something was wrong with you, so I'm here to help you.
Right. SubhanAllah.
Here to help you. Why? Because in Islam, you care for your neighbor. I mean, it's so much so the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, he's not a believer that fills his stomach up and goes to sleep at night while his neighbor's stomach remains empty. And they asked him, well, who are my neighbors? He said, 40 in any direction.
SubhanAllah. Well, Sheikh, we have about a minute left. So if you have something, do you have something special, some advice you could give to our viewers?
One of the things that always impresses me when I think about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is how he really did take care of his neighbors. And he said that a believer, his neighbor is safe from his hand and his tongue. So be careful what you do to your neighbor and be careful what you say about him. It's good advice come to us from our Prophet, peace be upon him.
Well, Sheikh, that's all the time we have today. We thank you for being with us. We encourage our viewers to watch us next time. And until then, I'm your host, Omar Dunlap, wishing you peace. Assalamu alaikum.
O youth, tear upon the core of blasphemy. Follow your prophet, and on evil make a victory. Let our righteousness be a role model to our children, making new generations of believers decently upbringing, with parents as an example. As gems we shape them, fearing only Allah, devoting our lives for Him.